My name is Natalie Rowan. I am 29 years old, and 2 days before Thanksgiving, I received a text that hollowed out my chest in a way I didn't fully grasp until much later. Hey Nat, we're keeping it small this year. Just immediate family. Hope you understand. I stared at the message for a long moment, blinking at my phone as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less painful. My mother wasn't cruel, not in the overt, dramatic way people imagine mothers can be. She was subtle, gentle, polite to a fault, and because of that, her disappointments, her exclusions felt sharper, like a quiet knife slipped under the ribs. Immediate family. I was immediate family. I had been immediate family my entire life. For the last 3 years, I'd hosted or co-hosted Thanksgiving dinner at least once. I was the one who prepped the menu, ironed the table runner, cleaned the wine glasses, and woke up early to roast sweet potatoes before anyone else even got out of bed. I was the middle child between my older sister Claire and my younger brother Luke, and even though I wasn't the loudest or the neediest, I was the one who showed up. Every time. So why this? I reread the message 3 times, weighing it in my mind like a stone. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. Maybe that made me the easiest person to subtract. Claire had twins. Luke had a new job that everyone made a big fuss about. I was stable, helpful, predictable. The one mom asked to repaint her kitchen last April. The one who babysat Claire's kids when she could barely stand from the flu. The one who drove Luke to the airport at 5 a.m. after he missed his rideshare. I was immediate family until it wasn't convenient. Something inside me tightened, but I didn't call her. I didn't respond. A tense, instinctive whisper told me to wait just for a moment before reacting. So I set the phone on the counter and continued making dinner, trying to pretend the knot in my stomach wasn't swelling. An hour later, while waiting for pasta water to boil, I opened Instagram. Maybe it was a distraction. Maybe I needed to remind myself that the world was still moving. Holiday lights still blinking, people still laughing. That was when I saw it. Claire's story. A boomerang loop of a long oak dining table draped in an expensive burnt orange linen. She bragged about buying from an artisan shop. 15 plates. 15. Each one with a gold-rimmed name card shaped like a leaf. Candles flickering. A turkey centerpiece so big it looked like it needed its own zip code. My thumb hovered over the screen. I watched it again, slower. My mother walked past the table, fussing with a stack of napkins. Claire laughed in the background. Luke reached for a pie, and someone off camera swatted his hand. The twins darted past, wearing matching sweaters. My father, who hated cameras, appeared briefly carving a turkey, while Claire pretended to frame the shot like it was some magazine photo shoot. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. The pot behind me rattled as the water reached a boil, but I didn't move. 15 place settings. 15 seats. 15 people. Not one chair left for me. A strange emptiness settled over me, like the moment after a car nearly hits you. The adrenaline freeze. The disbelief. The quiet realization that something fundamental has shifted. I put the phone down carefully, almost too gently, and turned off the stove. I cooked dinner anyway, salmon green beans, garlic, mashed potatoes, but I barely tasted any of it. I poured a glass of wine, set one plate at the table, and ate in silence. It wasn't the absence of an invitation that stung, it was what it signaled without saying that I was optional, replaceable, maybe even burdensome. That they didn't think I would ask questions. That they assumed I wouldn't notice or wouldn't make a fuss. I slept surprisingly well that night, or maybe I was simply exhausted, emotionally wrung out. I didn't know. When I woke the next morning, my phone lit up with 22 missed calls, 4 from Mom, 6 from Claire, 3 from Luke, and the rest from various relatives I hadn't heard from in months. The voicemail icon blinked at me, insistent and small. One new message. It was Aunt Mel, time-stamped 1:13 a.m. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it, almost uncertain. Natalie, honey, I don't know what happened, but I just wanted you to know I'm thinking of you. I thought you were out of town. That's what your mom told everyone. But Claire said something tonight, and well, something feels off. Call me when you can, sweetheart. I played the message twice before the meaning sank in. Out of town. That was the story. Mom didn't simply forget to invite me. She created a replacement narrative. She removed me so thoroughly, she built a lie to fill the empty space. And Claire joked about me being dramatic and not coming because I was in one of my moods. As if I had been the one avoiding them. As if I had invented my own erasure. I stood up without realizing it, pacing the length of my living room as anger, confusion, disbelief tangled together inside my chest. It wasn't about Thanksgiving anymore. It was about all the small moments I had brushed aside, the time Claire changed her birthday party date but assumed I'd see it on Facebook, the weekend Mom asked me to house sit, forgetting to mention Claire and the kids would be staying too, Luke borrowing money and disappearing for 2 months when I asked about repayment, the jokes, the comments, the quiet erasures. I ignored them because I didn't want to be the difficult sister, the dramatic daughter, the one who couldn't take a joke. But their silence now was deafening in a different way. They had done this deliberately. I didn't call anyone back. Not that day, not the next. I walked, cooked, slept, stared at the wall, scrolled through old photos, birthdays, Christmas mornings, even mundane Tuesday dinners. And in every single picture, I was in the background carving the ham, passing out plates, smiling behind the camera, clearing dishes. Always present, never centered, never chosen. And suddenly the truth slid into place with chilling clarity. I mattered only when I served a purpose. And when I stopped serving when they erased me. By the time Sunday arrived, I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was too sharp, too hot. I felt something colder, more distant. Something like grief. Grief for a family I thought I had. Grief for a place at a table that had never really been mine. And though I didn't know it yet, this was the beginning of something I could never have predicted, a rise that would begin quietly from the very bottom. Silence has a texture. It settles into a room the way dust does, soft at first, then heavy, then suffocating. By the third day after the Thanksgiving incident, silence had seeped into every part of my apartment. It lived in the corners in the kitchen light, in the untouched stack of dishes in my sink. It curled up beside me at night and hovered behind my chair when I worked. And instead of pushing it away, I let it cover me. I didn't answer any calls. I didn't text anyone back. I didn't even open social media. I just moved through my home like someone who'd misplaced a version of herself but couldn't quite remember where she last saw it. For years, I'd believed insisted that my family was close. We had our problems, sure, but what family didn't? My mother could be absent-minded, my sister, controlling my brother, dismissive, but I filled in the gaps. I showed up, I compensated, I explained away their actions to myself in a generous, forgiving voice. They're just busy, they didn't mean it that way, they're stressed. But the truth was sitting right in front of me now, and it refused to be decorated with excuses. They had not forgotten me, they had removed me. That realization tore something quiet and essential inside me. I barely ate. I cooked anyway, habit, muscle memory, maybe even comfort, but the food cooled untouched on the plates. One night I stood at the stove stirring a pot of soup until the steam blurred the windows, but when I finally sat down, the spoon felt too heavy to lift. I wasn't angry exactly. I didn't feel rage clawing inside me or resentment burning like a flame. It was more like hollowness, a space I didn't know how to fill. On the evening of the fourth day, I went on a walk to clear my head. It was cold, crisp enough for me to see my breath with every exhale. Grocery bags rustled softly in my hand, eggs, bread, cereal. A few things I didn't need but bought out of habit. I was passing by a bakery when something stopped me in my tracks. Inside, by the window, a father and his young daughter were seated at a small round table. The girl couldn't have been older than 8. She laughed so hard her shoulders shook, wiping a smear of frosting from her nose, while her father held a cupcake like it was a telephone speaking into it in a ridiculous voice that made her gasp for air between giggles. They were the kind of moment you don't know matters until someone else sees it pure whole, untouched. I stood there longer than I should have watching them, not because I wanted what they had, not because I craved a child or some magical parent-child bond, but because that father showed up. He was there. He cared. He made his daughter feel like she was worth sitting down for, worth laughing with, worth looking at. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something catch in my throat. Why didn't they do that for me? I made it home before I cried, but only just. I let the grocery bags fall onto the counter and walked straight to the bathroom. The moment the water hit my skin hot and foggy, something inside me unlatched. The tears came fast and unexpected, the kind that feel like they come from somewhere below the ribs. It wasn't loud, not dramatic, no sobbing, no hands clutching at the wall. Just quiet, steady grief. The kind that had been waiting for years. When the water finally cooled, I turned off the tap and leaned my forehead against the wall, breathing in the remnants of steam. I felt emptied. Not better, not healed, but emptied enough to think. And thinking was something I hadn't allowed myself to do honestly in a long time. The next morning, a small impulse nudged me toward my laptop, not to check messages, not to scroll, but to open a tab I hadn't touched in years, my old college blog. I'd named it Northbound Roads during a road trip phase that lasted 6 months before I discovered I was more of a stay-home and cook person. The login still worked. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. For a moment, I almost closed the tab, but something inside, something raw, something newly awakened kept me there. And then the words came, not elegant or poetic at first, just true. I wrote about the text, about the 15 seats, about the lies, about the feeling of being erased so cleanly that even the people who loved you didn't notice the empty space where your chair used to be. I didn't mention names. I didn't accuse. I simply wrote what happened the way it felt, the way it echoed. When I hit publish, I didn't expect anything. I closed the laptop and walked away. I made tea. I tidied up the living room. I folded laundry methodically, almost meditatively. 2 days later, when I checked the blog again, there were over a dozen comments. Then 2 dozen. Then more. I thought I was the only one. This made me cry. I spent Thanksgiving alone this year. Thank you for putting this into words. My family did this to me too. I sat back in my chair, exhaling slowly, like someone had just opened a window in a suffocating room. For the first time in days, weeks, maybe even years, I felt seen. Not by the people who were supposed to see me, but by people who genuinely understood. That was the spark I didn't expect. I wrote again the next day. A short post about a time when Luke borrowed my laptop and returned it cracked, brushing it off as if I should be grateful it wasn't worse. Another entry about Claire overshadowing a charity fundraiser I organized, taking the credit so easily it left me breathless. People responded again and again. The comments grew into paragraphs. Some shared stories. Some just sent virtual comfort. But all of it reminded me my voice mattered. Within a week, a small online publication emailed me asking if I'd like to write a monthly column. The pay was minimal, but the validation was priceless. I said yes. At work, I stopped hiding behind polite small talk. I joined a mentorship program. I sat with coworkers at lunch instead of eating alone at my desk. One of them, Ethan, a kind, soft-spoken guy from accounting, invited me on a group hike. For a brief second, Claire's voice echoed, "You don't have anyone." I went anyway. The trail was quiet, framed by bare winter trees, and the group welcomed me with warmth that surprised me. We talked, we laughed, we hiked again the next week, then the next. The blog continued to grow. Comments, shares, messages from strangers who felt like shadows in their own families. For years, I had been disappearing. Now, one word at a time, I was returning. But just as I began rising, the messages from my family began trickling in. Claire. The girls want to know if Aunt Natalie is coming for Christmas. Mom. Here's a recipe for Christmas cookies, Luke. Look at this meme, LOL. No apologies, no acknowledgement, just a steady push to resume the script. But I wasn't the same character anymore, and what came next would prove it. By early December, something inside me had shifted in a way I couldn't fully articulate yet. I wasn't healed. I wasn't whole. But I was no longer collapsing under the weight of my family's choices. The hollow ache had softened into something steadier, something that felt almost like clarity. My blog continued to grow in quiet, steady waves. Every day more comments appeared, messages from people who understood the invisible ache of being the forgotten one. People sent paragraphs describing Thanksgiving spent alone, birthday parties, skipped parents who treated them like afterthoughts. I read every comment, often more than once. It was strange how comforting strangers could be when the people who raised me felt so distant. The blog's new name, The Missing Chair, stuck instantly. Readers said the phrase hit them in places they didn't know still hurt. Others said they'd been the missing chairs in their own families for years. With every post, the space inside me where guilt used to live made room for something else, agency maybe, a sense of authorship. One night, just after publishing an essay about emotional invisibility, I noticed a new comment on an old post. The username made my breath catch, Just James, 1987. My cousin James. His profile photo was blank, but I knew the username. I'd seen it 100 times on his old gaming accounts years ago. He wrote only one line. I think I know who this is. If I'm right, I'm sorry. You deserve better. I stared at the screen for a long time. James was quiet at family gatherings, not confrontational, not loud, rarely involved in drama. But he was thoughtful. He noticed things. And if he knew, really knew who the posts were about, it meant the truth had already seeped into places my family never controlled. The next morning, I woke to another message. This one was from Aunt Mel. Natalie, I listened to your story on the radio replay. I'm proud of you, and I am so deeply sorry. Please know you were never invisible to me. Her words landed gently like something warm placed into my hands after a long, cold night. I typed back, "Thank you," and deleted the rest of the message I wanted to write. It wasn't time yet not to unpack decades of misalignment, not to explain the quiet wounds that had accumulated like dust. Instead, I leaned into the life forming around me. At work, I tentatively accepted an invitation to a coworker's Friday lunch outing. No forced smiles, no pretending, just quiet chatter about weekend plans and mildly chaotic office gossip. It was simple, unremarkable, but for me, it felt like stepping into a world I had always watched from the outside but never participated in. One afternoon, while packing up at my desk, Ethan stopped by and asked, "Are you coming to the winter hike on Saturday? A few new people are joining." I opened my mouth to decline an old instinct whispering that I didn't belong anywhere, but the memory of Claire's words flickered. "You don't have anyone, Natalie. You just float around." It had stung then. Now it hardened into resolve. "I'll be there," I said, surprising myself. The hike was more beautiful than I expected. Icy air, pale winter sunlight filtering through the trees, the soft crunch of frost beneath our boots. People chatted easily. They asked genuine questions. They listened. And no one expected anything from me except presence. It was the first time in months that my shoulders didn't feel heavy. Around the same time, an unexpected message arrived from an old college classmate, Adam Whitmore, someone I hadn't seen in more than a decade. He had stumbled across the missing chair through a friend's share. "You've become a hell of a writer," he wrote. "My agency is always looking for storytellers. Freelance at first if you're interested." I didn't respond immediately. I had learned to slow down to let offers sit in my chest before saying yes or no. But when I finally sent him my portfolio, he hired me within a week. Writing wasn't just an outlet now, it was work. It was purpose. It was something that belonged to me independent from anyone's approval. Yet even as my world expanded, my family's messages began circling back predictably, almost rhythmically. Claire sent a picture of her twins in Santa costumes captioned, "They miss you. Christmas at Mom's is at 5. You're coming, right?" My mother forwarded a chain email of cookie recipes as though nothing had shattered between us. Luke sent a meme about avoiding responsibilities. None said "I'm sorry." None said "we hurt you." None acknowledged the gaping wound they had opened. They were trying to reset the narrative to pretend nothing had happened, hoping I would slip back into my role, the helper, the emotional sponge, the reliable middle sister who held everything together without complaint. But something had changed in me, and they didn't know it yet. The first snowfall of the season arrived unexpectedly, a thick, soft curtain of white drifting past my apartment windows. I watched it fall from my favorite corner seat at a downtown cafe. Soft holiday jazz hummed overhead. My laptop glowed faintly in front of me, displaying the second column I'd written for the online magazine. I felt almost assembled. Maybe not fully repaired, but pulled together in a way that felt sturdy and new. My phone buzzed once, then again and again. "Claire, are you coming home for Christmas, Natalie? The girls are asking." "Mom, sweetheart, I found this great recipe for gingerbread cookies, Luke." "Lol, Mom's going crazy planning everything. Please show up so she stops pacing." They typed as if Thanksgiving had been an oversight, as if the lie about me being out of town had been a harmless misunderstanding, as if gaslighting could be swept away with a meme or a forwarded recipe. I ignored the messages. Instead, I looked around the cafe, the warm lights, the quiet murmur of people working the soft snow blanketing the street outside. This was where the idea found me. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't vengeful, it wasn't even intentional at first. Just a quiet spark when my eyes landed on a flyer taped to the coffee shop's bulletin board. Holiday Story Slam theme, home for the holidays. December 22nd. Share your truth. 5 minutes. No props. $1,000 prize. I stared at the flyer for almost a minute, my heart thudding in a slow, heavy rhythm. Home for the holidays. Home. What an interesting word. I stood up, tore the flyer from the board, and slipped it into my coat pocket. By the time I stepped into the falling snow, my decision was already made. Not for the money. Not for attention, but for something I never thought I'd have, a voice that didn't depend on anyone's permission. That night, I signed up for the event. Then I opened my email and wrote a single paragraph to Aunt Mel. "Thank you for everything you've said. I'm speaking at a local event next week. It would mean a lot if someone I trust was in the room. She responded within an hour. I'll be there. Just tell me when. The next day I wrote to James. I saw your message. I'm sharing a story next week. I think it will sound familiar. If you're free, I'd love for you to come. He replied the next morning. I'll be there. And Natalie, I'm really sorry. By December 20th, I had 6 people confirmed, 6 people who chose me. Meanwhile, my family continued messaging, unaware that a quiet reckoning was forming like a storm beyond their view. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the forgotten one. I was the one preparing to be heard. December 22nd arrived with the kind of winter chill that seeped through even the thickest coats. By then, the lights of downtown were strung in long, sparkling rows, reflections shimmering on the wet pavement like fallen stars. As I walked toward the small theater in the Arts District, I felt simultaneously grounded and weightless. It was the same sensation I used to get before important exams, still outside, trembling inside. I had rehearsed my 5-minute monologue countless times, not dramatically, not to perfection, but to truth. Every sentence was deliberate. Every pause had meaning. It wasn't a performance. It was a confession. The theater itself was intimate, warm, dimly lit, with strands of fairy lights winding across the ceiling beams, casting a soft golden glow over the audience. The smell of peppermint hot chocolate wafted from a concessions table near the door, lending the room a gentle holiday sweetness that softened the tension humming beneath my skin. Aunt Mel found me the moment I stepped inside. She wore a long navy coat and a soft gray scarf wrapped around her neck, her eyes warm and earnest. She hugged me tightly, her embrace steady maternal in the way I had always wished my own mother could manage. You're going to be extraordinary, she whispered, squeezing my hands. Just speak the truth. It will land where it needs to land. Her confidence steadied me in ways she would never fully understand. A few minutes later, my cousin James arrived with his girlfriend Mia. He looked uncomfortable at first, reading the room, then softened when our eyes met. He gave me a small nod, quiet, firm, the kind of gesture that carries the weight of apology without words. Soon after, 3 people from my hiking group and 2 coworkers slipped into seats near the back, offering waves and quiet encouragement. The presence of those 6 people, none of whom owed me anything, felt heavier, more meaningful than any holiday dinner I had attended in years. I checked my phone before heading backstage. One new message from Claire, time-stamped 15 minutes prior. Mom's setting the table early for Christmas. She wants to know if you're coming. Please don't make things weird. Nothing in me stirred at those words. Not guilt, not longing, just a quiet finality. I turned off my phone and slipped it into my bag. Backstage performers gathered with note cards, water bottles, and nervous smiles. Some practiced lines under their breath. Others paced in small circles. I stood still. My heartbeat was steady, but purposeful, like it understood what tonight represented. The performer before me, a young man with a sharp wit, told a comedic story about getting locked inside an airport bathroom on Christmas Eve. The audience roared with laughter. His energy filled the room. His story landed effortlessly. Then the MC said my name. A hush fell before applause began, polite, expectant. I stepped into the light, feeling its warmth wrap around me. The brightness blinded me for a second, turning the audience into vague silhouettes, their presence more felt than seen. I gripped the microphone, breathed in deeply, and began. I always thought holidays were about belonging. My voice was calm, steadier than I expected. Not trembling, not breaking, measured, honest. About home. About knowing that no matter how imperfect your family might be, you still have a seat at the table. You still matter. You're still part of something. There was no anger in my tone, only clarity. I watched heads tilt, shoulders soften, people leaning in. But this year, I learned something else. Something I hadn't wanted to see. A pause, a breath. Sometimes people love the version of you that serves them. The version that stays quiet. The version that cooks the meals, cleans the dishes, watches the kids, runs the errands. The version that doesn't complain, doesn't confront, doesn't ask for anything. Someone in the front row wiped their eyes discreetly. And when you stop fitting into their picture, when you stop playing the role they assigned you, they crop you out. The silence thickened, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was attention, recognition. I didn't get a seat at the table this year, not because I was out of town, not because I had plans, but because it was easier for them to pretend I wasn't part of the story. My hands stayed still on the microphone. My breathing remained even. I could hear the faint rustle of program sheets in the audience, a cough, the hum of the stage lights. But here's what I learned: in the empty space that left behind being cut out isn't the end. It can be the beginning. A moment to rebuild, to rediscover, to reclaim your name, your place, your voice. My throat tightened, but the words continued to flow. You can be erased from a holiday. You can be lied about, dismissed, rewritten. But the truth has a way of finding the surface again. A small hush rippled through the room as I reached my final line. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop waiting for them to pull out a chair and build your own instead. I let the silence sit for a beat, a long, quiet beat that felt almost sacred. Then applause began, soft at first, then stronger, then full, warm, sustained. Not thunderous, but deeply felt. A wave that washed over me until my chest tightened with a different kind of emotion relief. When I stepped off stage, Aunt Mel reached me first. Tears gathered in her eyes as she wrapped me in her arms. "You said what so many people never get the chance to say," she murmured. "And you said it with grace." James pulled me into a hug, next firmer than his usual reserved demeanor. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know how bad it was. But I'm here now." For a moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of support, I felt the truth settle inside me. I wasn't as alone as my family had made me believe. Hours later, as the event wrapped up and winners were announced, I didn't expect anything. I stood near the back, sipping lukewarm tea from a paper cup when the MC's voice drifted over the speakers. "Second place goes to Natalie Rowan." I froze. The room applauded again, warm, encouraging, and I walked back toward the stage, accepting the small envelope with shaking hands. I wasn't thinking about the prize. All I could hear was what the MC said next. "And we will be airing her story on local radio during our Christmas Eve special tomorrow evening." The air left my lungs. Radio. Christmas Eve. My family would hear it. That knowledge carried a curious weight, not revenge, not triumph. Just truth finally moving beyond the walls. They tried so hard to confine it within. When I checked my phone that night, after I'd returned home and washed the stage makeup from my face, I found a single message waiting for me. From my mother. "I heard your story. No apology, no ownership, just a statement." A door cracked open, but only slightly. And for the first time in my life, I didn't rush to push it wider. Because this wasn't the climax. This was only the setup. What came next would be the part they never saw coming. Christmas morning arrived quietly without the familiar chaos of group texts or early calls. No sounds of nieces shrieking with excitement. No oven timers beeping in the background of my mother's voice. No gentle request from Claire to pick up last-minute cranberry sauce on my way over. Instead, I woke to soft winter sunlight brushing across my living room floor and the low hum of my heater clicking on. I made coffee. Strong, black, comforting. The mug warmed my hands as I sank into my sofa, pulling a blanket around my legs. The apartment was still, peaceful. It felt almost surreal, this absence of obligation. For once, I wasn't preparing to perform a role in someone else's carefully curated holiday tableau. I wasn't rushing cooking or tiptoeing around delicate egos. I was just here, alone, yes, but not empty. My mother's message from the night before I heard your story lingered in the back of my mind, a shadow begging to be examined. There were no follow-up questions, no apology, no recognition of the hurt she'd caused. Just a statement delivered as if hearing my truth had been an inconvenience she wanted to acknowledge only because silence would have been impolite. I refused to let myself get pulled back into old patterns of deciphering her intentions or minimizing my own feelings to preserve the image she preferred. Instead, at 8:30 a.m., I opened the family's Facebook group, Family Fun and Food. My mother had created it years ago, eager to preserve memories and share recipes, filling it with pictures of picnics, birthdays, anniversaries, and holiday spreads. For years, I had been the unofficial archivist, posting photos, adding captions, organizing events. My presence lived in that group in the form of effort, not acknowledgement. I clicked Create Post. There was no shaking in my hands, no doubt creeping in. I uploaded the transcript of my Story Slam monologue, the exact words I had spoken under the glow of stage lights. Then beneath it, I typed a simple message. I wasn't going to share this here, but after being excluded from Thanksgiving and told I didn't fit into my own family, I realized silence only protects the ones causing the harm. This is my truth. I am not asking for apologies. I am not asking for explanations. I am simply done pretending everything is fine. Merry Christmas. I reread it once, breathing in deeply. Then I hit post. Afterward, I closed the app, set my phone on the counter, and walked away. No hovering, no waiting for reactions. I had said what needed to be said, and the words could carry themselves now. A few hours later, I drove to Aunt Mel's house for Christmas lunch. She'd invited me the morning after the story. Slam, her voice gentle but firm, as if she'd decided I wasn't spending this holiday alone. Her house was warm, decorated modestly with garlands along the staircase and cinnamon-scented candles flickering on the mantel. James arrived early to help set the table, and his girlfriend Mia offered to take coats with an enthusiasm that felt surprisingly genuine. The table was small, simple, and unpretentious. Real connections didn't need elaborate centerpieces. As we set plates and poured cider, laughter flowed easily between us, soft, familiar, unforced. It felt like family, but the kind I hadn't known I was allowed to have. Halfway through lunch, as we debated whether a certain Christmas movie counted as a classic, my phone buzzed once in my pocket, then again, and again. The vibration continued in sporadic bursts in escalating frequency until I felt it would be almost rude to keep ignoring it. After dessert, I excused myself and stepped into the hallway to check my phone. The screen lit up with notifications, missed calls, text tags, messages. The family Facebook group had exploded. The first message was from Claire. "What is wrong with you? Why would you embarrass Mom like this? You posted that for the whole family to see." Then from my mother, "Please delete that post. We don't air private matters publicly." This was hurtful and unnecessary. My father, who rarely texted at all. "Call your mother. She's upset." Luke, "Seriously? Did you have to post that? You're making this into a huge thing." If there had been even one apology among them, one sentence acknowledging what they'd done, maybe the messages would have landed differently. But each one reinforced the truth I already knew. They weren't upset by the pain they caused. They were upset their carefully maintained image had finally cracked. I scrolled down. There were dozens of comments under my post. Cousins, aunts, old family friends. Some expressed shock, some expressed sympathy, a few expressed confusion, but one stood out. My mother's sister, Aunt Lisa, Natalie. "I had no idea any of this happened. I'm so sorry you were treated this way. You've always been a part of this family, and you always will be. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." Her words struck something deep. This was the first time someone in the immediate family circle acknowledged harm rather than deflecting it. And that was the beginning. Because once one person broke the silence, others followed. Over the next 3 days, messages from distant relatives trickled in. Some apologizing for not noticing earlier, some sharing their own experiences of quiet exclusion, some simply offering support. But my mother, Claire, and Luke went silent after their initial barrage. Their silence didn't frighten me. It revealed exactly what had been hidden for years. Their love came with conditions, terms, and roles I had finally refused to fulfill. On December 28th, I sat down at my desk and began writing again. This time it wasn't a monologue. It was an essay, raw, candid, and unflinchingly clear, titled, "When Family Doesn't Feel Like Home." I wrote about the way affection can feel like currency in families built on hierarchy and unspoken rules, about performing loyalty in exchange for scraps of belonging, about gaslighting, dressed in polite smiles and holiday traditions. I didn't mention their names, not out of protection for them, but because this wasn't a story about them. It was a story about the quiet, aching experience shared by so many people who had messaged me in private. When I published it, I expected moderate attention. Instead, it went viral. Within 48 hours, it had 50,000 views. My inbox filled with messages from people across the country. Some said they were crying. Some said they were leaving a toxic family situation because my words finally gave them language for their pain. One message stood out, a producer from a regional news station. They were planning a New Year's segment about found family and wanted to interview me. I said yes. The interview filmed on January 2nd in my living room. The reporter asked thoughtful questions, and I answered with the kind of honesty I used to be afraid of. When the segment aired, it showed me speaking about boundaries, about truth, about choosing yourself, even when the cost felt impossibly high. 2 days later, another text from my mother arrived. "You've made your point. I hope you're happy." I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. "I'm not happy that it came to this. I'm happy that I stopped letting you pretend it didn't happen." She didn't reply. Claire never messaged again. Luke blocked me a week later. I thought their final silence might break something in me, but it didn't. Instead, it felt like setting down a weight I had been carrying since childhood. Over the next few months, my life continued growing in ways I never expected. My blog reached over 100,000 readers. I signed a contract to publish a collection of essays. I traveled with the hiking group, discovering parts of the country I'd never seen. I built friendships, real ones, rooted in authenticity and choice. And through it all, I watched my family from a distance, their curated photos more hollow than ever. Their table was full, but one chair, my chair, remained conspicuously empty. And for the first time in my life, it didn't hurt, because I had finally built a table of my own. Winter began to thaw slowly that year, the way a bruise fades first at the edges, then gradually toward the center. January melted into February, then slipped quietly into early spring, and for the first time in a long time, I felt no sense of dread about the coming months. My calendar began filling with things I had chosen, not things I had been guilted into. Writing deadlines, hiking trips, coffee catch-ups with coworkers who had become real friends, occasional dinners with Aunt Mel, who insisted on sending me home with leftovers no matter how much I protested. My family did not contact me again. There were no long apologetic emails, no sudden attempts to repair what they had broken. Instead, silence stretched across the space between us, a thick, motionless fog. And strangely, that silence no longer felt like punishment. It felt like clarity. On social media, I watched from a distance as they posted photos of birthdays, brunches, the twins' school recitals, and one overly elaborate Mother's Day picnic. I recognized the tablecloth, the one I had helped my mother pick out 2 years earlier. I recognized the plates, the glass pitchers, all the little touches I used to help with. But something was different. It wasn't the missing chair, the space where mine would have been if I still played my role. It was the expressions. Their smiles looked slightly too controlled, their poses too choreographed. The kind of staging that suggested a picture curated for strangers, not captured for memories. They looked like people performing together, not people living together. For years, I mistook performance for warmth. Now I finally understood the difference. My absence hadn't broken their rhythm, it had exposed it. Meanwhile, my own life began expanding in ways I couldn't have predicted. The missing chair grew steadily, drawing in thousands of readers who found comfort in shared vulnerability. Comments turned into conversations. Conversations into connections. People sent their own stories asking if I would ever write a series on healing family estrangement. Some asked for advice. Some simply said, "Thank you for saying the thing I couldn't." An editor from a small publishing house reached out in late February, asking if I'd ever considered turning my essays into a book. A collection, she said. Something intimate and accessible. Something for every person who had ever felt like the outsider at their own table. The contract arrived a month later. I signed it with my hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of a door finally closing behind me, and a new one opening. I sent Aunt Mel a photo of the signed contract. She called immediately, her voice bright with pride. "I knew you had something important to say," she told me. "Sometimes it takes losing the wrong audience to find the right one." Her words stayed with me long after our call ended. In early April, the hiking group planned a trip to Oregon. I hadn't traveled in years, not for myself, not for joy, not because I wanted to, but that season of my life was over. I booked a ticket without hesitation. The trip was a clarity I didn't know I needed. The forest smelled of pine and wet soil. The air was cold and sharp. For 5 days, we climbed ridges overlooking vast, untouched stretches of wilderness. I laughed more than I thought possible. I took photos of mountains of moss, of wide open sky. Not for posting, not for proving anything, but because I wanted to remember the feeling of being small in a world that was finally big enough for me. On the last night, sitting by a soft orange campfire, Ethan handed me a mug of cocoa and asked quietly, "Do you ever miss them?" It wasn't an accusatory question, not pitying, just human. I stared at the flames flickering against the dark. "Yes," I said honestly, "but I think I miss the version of them I needed more than the reality of who they were." He nodded, and that was the end of the conversation. No probing, no assumptions, just presence. The kind I used to give freely without receiving in return. By summer, I felt like someone I almost didn't recognize in a good way. Stronger in my boundaries, clearer in my voice. I met James for coffee every few weeks. He apologized again without using the word sorry, through gestures instead of language. He showed up. He listened. He admitted quietly that he'd always sensed something was off, even years ago. "I should have checked on you more," he said once. I shook my head. "You can't apologize for not seeing what I worked so hard to hide." He exhaled. Well, I see it now. And he did. So many people did. My found family. My chosen family was no longer a poetic idea. It was real, tangible, built not from blood, but from intention and reciprocity. The final shift came in early autumn. I received an email from a well-known speaker series, one that hosted TED-style talks focused on personal transformation and human resilience. They wanted me to speak at an event themed around rewriting the story. They had found me through my essays, through the interview, through the missing chair. I read the email 3 times, breath-catching with each pass. Would I stand on a stage again? Yes. And this time not to speak from the wounds, but from the healing. I accepted the invitation. My talk centered around the weight of silence, the cost of erasure, and the beauty of rebuilding truth with your own hands. As I stood under the lights looking out at the audience, I didn't feel the tremor of fear I expected. I felt grounded, whole. I wasn't performing for approval. I wasn't begging to be chosen. I wasn't trying to reclaim a seat that had never truly belonged to me. I was speaking from a place I had built myself. When I walked off stage, the applause felt different than before, less like validation, more like recognition. Recognition of someone who had left a table where she was never fed and learned to craft her own. Months later, on a quiet evening, as I sat editing the final draft of my book, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I didn't answer, but the voicemail icon blinked afterward. I hesitated only a second before playing it. My mother's voice filled the room, soft, cautious, almost brittle. Natalie, I saw the announcement about your book. I saw your talk. I don't know what to say except, I hope you're well. There was no apology, no accountability. Just the sound of someone who realized too late that the child she once expected would always come back, no longer needed to. I deleted the voicemail, not out of cruelty, but out of acceptance. Her story didn't need to end with closure for mine to continue without her. As autumn drifted into winter again, I hosted my own holiday dinner. A small one, only 8 chairs. People I loved. People who chose me. People who respected the boundaries I fought so hard to build. We laughed, we ate, we toasted to new beginnings. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a background character. My seat at the table was full. My space was mine. My story was mine. And I had written every word of it. Sometimes the most powerful seat at the table is the one you choose to walk away from.